Big luxury SUVs are the in thing right now. Even the likes of Rolls-Royce and Bentley have had to give in to that trend. I think it began somewhere with the Range Rovers. Now you see, building a large, big car with acres of space, indulgent materials and bespoke craftsmanship is fairly an easy job because you're charging quite a lot of money for it, isn't it? But then adding off-road capability into the mix, that becomes difficult. And then when you come to cars like the GLS, which claim to be the S-class of SUVs, things get even more difficult because then it's not only about opulent luxury, it's also about packing a lot of technology under that hood. And then the off-road capability of cars like the Range Rovers don't make life very easy for cars like the GLS. So does the new GLS do it all? To find out, we travel to the state of Utah. Known for its rocky terrain, perfect for SUVs to show off their skills on. Unlike our GLE test in Texas last year, this one promised to have a fair bit of off-roading lined up, but we'll come to that in a bit. Mercedes-Benz chooses to bring us to the United States for its SUV tests because these are produced here in Tuscaloosa in the state of Alabama. And therefore testing these Mercedes-Benz SUVs right here in the United States of America is like going to a farmer's market. Ours is in the Salt Lake City in the state of Utah, not too far away from the Bonneville Salt Flats. It's a pity though that we aren't going to be going there, but even if we did, the new GLS wouldn't have a problem blasting down those salt flats because now it has a more advanced 4MATIC system. Unlike before where the power split was always 50-50, this one is predominantly rear wheel driven and can transfer up to 50% of the power and torque to the front wheels. So blasting down, putting the power down in that salty, sandy terrain of the Bonneville Salt Flats wouldn't be a problem at all for this car. It can also transfer power and torque from side to side in case you want to go slide to slide. But then again, we are not on the salt flats to test it out. But Mercedes-Benz assures that it has a lot more off-road capability than before, and there's a lot more capability than just a straight line dash. But off-roading capabilities in a car like this is more like a feel-good factor for your investment than something that you would need often. So we will come to the off-road capability a little later. Let's now begin and see what this car feels like on tarmac. Despite those thick A-pillars, cornering visibility is actually quite good in the GLS. Not like the previous one was any bad, but this one is a notch better. And you also have these big bulges on the hood which add that sportier edge to the visibility that you get outside of the windshield. Furthermore, you also have these large wing mirrors which give you a clear visibility of what's behind and also give you a visibility of where the rear corners of the car are. You can also get a nice clear judgment of the length of the car. There are of course parking aids which help you further when you're parking the car in tight spaces. But while driving out on the road, even in congested traffic or making maneuvers even in congested traffic, getting a judgment of all the four corners of the car is not a big deal at all despite the size of the new GLS. And despite the large wing mirrors, you don't really have a lot of wind noise creeping up from around these A-pillars. Even at highway speeds in excess of 130-140 kilometers an hour, the cabin actually stays quite silent. Contributing further to that is an improved aerodynamic efficiency of the front end. It now boasts of a drag coefficient of 0.32, which is an improvement over the previous car. And this improved aerodynamic efficiency is not for bettering your top speed on the Bonneville Salt Flats, but it's more to do with better cabin noise, better noise insulation in that sense, lesser wind noise in that sense. It really works. Like I said, even at highway speeds, the cabin tends to stay quite silent. The Face ID on my phone usually has a problem recognizing my face if I'm wearing polarized sunglasses. The other problem with polarized sunglasses is that you usually can't read the heads-up display on most cars, but in the new GLS you can, loud and clear. In fact, it's also huge. It's massive in size, gives a lot of information without really causing any sort of an information overload. And the way the layout is, the way the display is, it almost feels like augmented reality. Just that it isn't. But you do get augmented reality on the new mapping software in the MBUX. And believe me, it is very handy. We already tried it in the GLE. It also makes its way to the new GLS now, especially if you're coming to a crowded intersection or a very confusing intersection. This augmented reality really helps. It takes the confusion away, makes it less stressful. which is why I now actually prefer this over Google Maps. And that's a big thing to say, because Google Maps out there is one of the most feature-rich mapping softwares, and I really prefer it to anything else in any of the other cars that I have tried. But this one is really, really good, something that I rate higher than Google Maps. The mapping software also tells me that the route that I'm driving on right now is sometimes just closed without warning, and that is because the weather out here in the mountains is a little tricky. It can snow for prolonged durations, the wind can be quite strong here, and that is the reason why it is not very safe to drive on this road. And that is where things like the 4MATIC or the all-wheel drive come in. In fact, it's increasingly becoming popular. Even in India, people are opting for 4MATIC or all-wheel drive options, even though it doesn't snow that much. But then it is just an added layer of safety when you're driving on road conditions that are not very predictable. And going forward, 4MATIC or all-wheel drive could actually become standard for most SUVs and cars from Mercedes-Benz. The AMGs are certainly going 4MATIC for the entire range. And the SUVs, well, it just makes sense to have all-wheel drive on all their models. And speaking of snow, there it is. With the generation change, the GLS gets a host of new engines. The ones likely for India are the 3-litre inline-6 petrol and diesel engines available in the GLS 450 and the 400D guises, which respectively replace the current V6-powered GLS 400 and 350D with higher output and cleaner emissions. Both the engines are ready for BS6 operation, which isn't news anymore in the Mercedes-Benz stable. The engine in the GLS 450 is mated to an integrated starter generator, which gives the drivetrain an additional 250 Nm and 22 PS under the pretext of the EQ boost function, as and when there is load on the engine. If I were to choose between the two engines, I would go with the 450 petrol. Now, I'm usually in favor of diesel engines when it comes to big SUVs like this, but the 450 petrol, I like it for its refinement and I like it for that EQ boost function that it brings on board. So with that EQ boost, you do get torque fill, you do get that torque assistance as and when the engine requires it. And what that translates into is nice, clean, linear acceleration. You don't have any surge of power coming in, doesn't feel overwhelming at all. But more importantly, when you're driving at slow city speeds, which you will most of the time in India, you don't get that jerky feeling that you usually will get on large diesel SUVs. Here it's nice and smooth, pulls cleanly. And out on the highway, you have 500 Newton meters of torque. So pulling overtakes, not a problem at all. Cruising calmly, no problem either. The diesel engine misses out on the EQ boost function, but more than makes up for it with better power and torque compared to the outgoing GLS 350D. There's 700 Newton meters of torque, so whether you're driving around twisties, driving on the highway, cruising, pulling overtakes, any of that shouldn't be a problem at all. Both engines continue to feed the power and torque to the 9-speed gearbox, which is now marginally quicker in its operation. The diesel powertrain has a fairly strong pull from the word go and does its city and highway duties extremely well. I won't call it the most refined engine in its class, but its practicality, reliability and high efficiency is hard to find faults with. And therefore the diesel is likely to remain the volume generator even for the new GLS. The Airmatic air suspension is standard across the range for the GLS now, but you also have the new Electronic Active Body Control or EABC with the new GLS. It's something that we already sampled with the GLE, and I'm suspecting Mercedes-Benz India may not bring that on the GLE when it comes to India. But for the GLS, it could be made available as an option, and I really hope they do. They should also make it available as an option for the GLE. It's a brilliant technology to have. Now the air suspension, of course, it has a very supple ride quality even on some of the B roads that I've driven right now. On some of the sharper bumps also, it doesn't feel as firm as you would expect from air suspensions in the past. This one has a more supple ride quality, the cushioning is really nice. But then once you hit the twisties, this air suspension is not fast enough to react to quick switchbacks, and it makes the length of this car evident. It's not unnerving, it doesn't feel like it's not going to take the turn, but it's not sporty enough. You feel the weight and the length of this car. The EABC, however, fixes that. the electronic active body control is much better in that regard by maintaining a flatter ride. It works well at highway speeds and takes away the firm edge or sometimes the overly squishy nature that we usually experience with big European SUVs. And around the winding roads, it also has a curve function, which apart from stiffening up the suspension setup for the curves, also helps the car tilt into the turn, like a motorcycle, to put things into perspective. It seems a bit unnecessary on an SUV, but the advantage is that you don't get too much vertical movement despite the size. The eABC, along with all the sensors, cameras, LiDAR, radar, which is a lot of them in this car, it will scan the road for imperfections for that S-Class-like magic carpet ride. But where it goes a step further is its ability to even gauge larger undulations. So if you were to take the car out on mild off-road trails, it will be able to give you that kind of a flat ride even on those kind of trails. So compared to the Airmatic, the eABC shines not only on tarmac but also off the road. In fact, to demonstrate that, let's actually take this car off the road. The eABC gives this mammoth the ability to dance. Not a pretty sight, yes, but it's a pretty good feature to have. Courtesy of a 48-volt electronic system, the individually controlled air springs can not only make several damping changes in a second, but they can also lift either of the four corners by an additional 60mm if instructed. Regular air suspension or adaptive dampers simply can't do this or react as quickly either. As before, the GLS features a central differential lock, low range ratios and a water weighting capability of 600mm, which isn't yet in the territory of the Range Rover, but very capable nevertheless. Our test car on the trail was running all-season tires on 20-inch rims, despite which the eABC ensured a smooth, comfortable and a surprisingly flat ride even when accelerating down an undulated and gravelly surface. In fact, we drove on an ATV trail and the GLS did most of it in its basic comfort mode, and only the trickier stuff like articulating over boulders, wading through the river or descending down a steep slope needed the GLS to pull off its off-road mode and show off its adventure skills. In fact, the new GLS will also judge the driver's skill at using these off-road tools and present them with a score at the end of an off-road drive. We found this score to side with the idea of slow and steady wins the race, and it's a nifty piece of infotainment to go with your off-road drives. The question, however, is, would you like to scratch the expensive paint on your GLS by driving it into such forests? Mostly not, but like I said, having these capabilities is more of a feel-good appeal for your investment and better peace of mind if you decide to go cross-country with your family. So while some of the other fellows have taken the car that I was driving onto the off-road trails, I have snuck out with a GLS 580. Now, the claim to fame for this particular car is that it uses a 4-liter engine that for the first time in the history of Mercedes-Benz is using hybrid assistance with this particular motor. What's so special about this particular motor? Well, this belongs to the same family of bi-turbo V8 engines that even AMG uses in some of their newer sports cars. You can already see my face gleaming and smiling. Now, of course, there are mechanical differences between this engine and what AMG uses, but the moment you put your foot down even in this engine, its AMG roots, its AMG connection is highlighted with that sound. Of course, this is not as throaty as an AMG, there are no crackles and pops, but this is the classic sound of a V8 and it just fits into the American scheme of things very well. The perfect kind of GLS to be driving on lovely roads in Utah right now. The curvy roads through the mountains, this is the perfect engine for it. The sport mode on this feels very different than the sport mode that you get in the lower GLS variants. The steering weighs up nicely, the suspension stiffens up nicely, this has the eABC on it, and with the curve control and all those kind of things working in its favor, wow, this is a brilliant handling package. Certainly the GLS seems like it has shrunk, it doesn't feel that long, it doesn't feel that big, it just feels so much sportier, and just the way it should be on roads like these. So this GLS 580 is the top of the line GLS that you can buy right now, until of course the AMG comes out, and more importantly the Maybach variant comes out. Yes, there is a GLS Maybach under development for the first time. Like the S-Class, this is a variant that will sit at the top of the chain for the GLS. But right now, we are told this is only being developed for the Chinese and the American markets, and the other markets are still under consideration. They have still not decided. So whether it comes to India or not is something that we don't know yet. But what we certainly know is some of the features or some of the equipment that you see on the 580 may not make its way into the Indian market. And that is the reason why I'm going to pull over now and I'm going to show you the cabin of the car that may come to India in terms of its equipment. Let's take a look. So the first thing that you will notice when you get inside the cabin of the new GLS is an all-new layout. Looks quite plush, looks quite nice. You have these S-Class like twin screen setup, which again is now getting common across Mercedes-Benz cars. You also have a new layout for the AC vents. You have this squared off shape, a squared off design that we also saw on the GLE. But we received a polarizing response from most of our viewers on the design, on the placement, on the overall layout. But I think it looks quite nice. I quite like it. It matches the detailing that you see on the outside, on the grille, on the skid plates. Now, bits that I don't like, one of which is the center armrest. It's ergonomically placed, it's comfortable and everything, but it opens like this. It doesn't open like the S-Class, where it's one seamless unit that can be opened from either sides. That was a really cool feature, and if this is the S-Class of SUVs, this ought to have had it. The other bit that I don't like is this wireless charging pad. It's great that it's there, but for bigger phones, it's not very friendly. It doesn't fit properly, and once you do, it's a bit of an effort to get it out. In fact, Mercedes-Benz calls the new GLS the largest battery pack on wheels, with 11 charging ports in this cabin. As you would expect, and as is evident already, there are a host of new material and upholstery choices that you get inside the new GLS. I particularly like this coarse texture that you get for the leather upholstery here. Now, if I was buying the new GLS, I would spec it in a dark blue shade on the outside and a bright cream shade on the inside, something similar to what we saw earlier when I was driving the petrol variant. Like most new age cars, luxury cars that have fancy electronic suspensions, even this car can lower itself to make easy ingress and egress. And then you also have a third row, the entry for which can be electronically controlled. It's a little slow, but then easier than pulling levers, right? Right then. And even for my size, getting in and out of the third row is not a problem at all. It's actually quite spacious in here. Headroom is surprisingly good. Visibility outside of the window is quite nice too. So for the third row seating, it's quite nice. Now, this car can be specified with a 6-seater or a 7-seater layout. This is the 6-seater variant with 2 captain seats in the second row. But the party piece is the 7-seater layout. The 7-seater configuration features a plusher bench in the second row with a center armrest that stores away an Android tablet with touchscreen functions for the climate control, massaging, window blinds, etc. There are the conventional switches on the door, of course, for adjusting reach and recline, but controlling them from the tablet makes it cooler.
I'd like to go to Salt Lake City.
The tablet also controls the infotainment functions for the rear seat Mercedes-Benz user experience, or the MBUX.
To Salt Lake City.
So the MBUX infotainment system was one of the big talking points for the GLE, and it completely blew us away with the wealth of features that it brought to the table. The GLS pushes that envelope further. There's functionality that is now better, that is more user-friendly, that is more optimized. So you have the gesture controls which are further optimized, and now you also have a voice recognition system that even recognizes which seat is the voice command coming from. So if it's the passenger giving the voice command, for example, I'm feeling too hot, only that side of the climate control will drop the temperature. If I say I'm feeling too cold, it will again adjust the air conditioning on my side. I can even say, okay, I think I need massaging. It will know that it's the driver who is saying that, and the massaging will begin on the driver's seat. How that happens? Well, 2 different mics, very sensitive mics, which are unidirectional, and they know which direction the voice command is coming from. And I think it's a cool feature, and it works quite well. Another thing that I like about this new MBUX system is a quick access menu that can simply be accessed through the settings menu. There's a quick access. So all the commonly used functions you can have right here. You can turn off the HUD, you can turn off park control. All this is right here. And then there's this one interesting feature. This is a car wash feature. It's very thoughtful actually, because it's not you who is going to take the car to the car washing center, it's your chauffeur, but then this is a very handy feature to have. So essentially this will prepare the car for a car wash. What that means is essentially it will fold in the mirrors, it will turn off the parking sensor so that they don't keep beeping. It will also turn off the rain sensor. That's something that is very important. You have always seen the rain sensor going off the moment water hits the windshield at a car wash. That is going to protect the wipers and not turn it on unintentionally. It will also make sure that the sunroof, the windows, everything is closed so that your upholstery, the cabin doesn't get wet. So it's a very small feature if you think about the technicality of it, but a very big feature if you think about the usability of it. And I'm glad someone's thought about it.
So when can you try all of these functions? Well, you will be able to try most of these features first in the GLE, as the GLS is expected to come sometime at the end of 2019.
So as an onlooker, if the sheer size of this car doesn't set the visual scale for you, and if Mercedes-Benz design language ends up making it a little confusing for you to differentiate between the GLE and the GLS, well, here's a very easy way to differentiate these cars. It's the same way that you do with the saloons. So saloons have not only given these cars their final alphabet in their names, they've also given them the detailing code for the headlamps. So like the E-Class has 2 DRLs, the GLE gets 2 DRLs, like the S-Class, even the GLS gets 3 lighting elements for its signature lighting. Furthermore, the grille on the GLS is broader at the top, whereas the GLE is broader at the bottom. Similarly, when you move towards the rear, the GLE has that floating D-pillar effect, whereas this gets a chunky D-pillar, and it highlights the sheer size and the length of this car. After all, this is the S-Class of SUVs.
The current GLS is still going very strong for Mercedes-Benz, and since its main draw remains its size, seating and comfort, it will continue to do so until the day this replacement arrives. The new GLS scores big points on all those counts too, by being larger inside and out and packing in a host of new creature comforts that we just showed you. It also looks sportier with its sleeker lines. Add to it the enhanced off-road capabilities and the trickery of the electronic active body control, and you're looking at an all-rounder that justifies its punchline of being the S-Class of SUVs and then some.